What's up, you guys? This is Jason from RPM, and today we're going to be installing a RPM Catch Can on this Maverick R. Usually we do these in our fab shop next door, but the Maverick R is in the dyno. We really didn't want to unhook it. It's kind of cold today, so we're just going to go ahead and install it here on the dyno. And honestly, it kind of works out better because everything's kind of level. But moving on to our Catch Can. Watch our product video to get a better understanding of our Catch Can. But essentially, it's going to be up here, out of the way, no debris. It's got a quick valve. You just twist it. It drops the fluid down through our hose, and then you can catch your condensation, oily residue, and all that stuff that you don't want to be burning through your motor that gets trapped in the Catch Can. Let's jump to it. You're going to see the Catch Can getting all assembled, installed on the vehicle, and so on and so forth. Essentially, what the easiest way to do this is to remove the intake hoses and the air box. I know it sounds like a lot, but honestly, it's only 2 clamps and 2 13mm bolts, and you can have the air box out of this machine. Super easy, super straightforward. You'll kind of get to see a couple of the other RPM parts. So your machine's not going to have this wire hanging and some other stuff tucked in here that picking up our RPM signal for our dyno. But for the most part, this is what yours is going to look like, and we're going to show you how to install it. All right, guys, let's open up the Catch Can. This is how you're going to receive it. All right, guys, you've got 2 ear clamps. One is larger than the other. The smaller one is for your OEM intake tube. If you're running a RPM intake tube, that's the larger one. This will clamp the billet plug into your intake port. Once you start running a Catch Can, you'll no longer need that intake port. So we include the billet plug. That's what these are for. Moving on, we've got the intake filter. So this is the filter. It'll go on top of the Catch Can. This is your hardware pack. You got a couple zip ties for securing the hoses up out of the way. You've got your drain hose. You got the billet clamp that goes on the back of the Catch Can. It secures it to the frame. Catch Can pre-filter, mounting hardware, Loctite, the billet plug that we were just talking about that goes into the intake tube, and your Catch Can drain valve. Here, you've got a proprietary hose. This is going to go from the motor to the Catch Can. It'll be cut to length, but this is a specific hose for the Can-Am. Motor side, Catch Can side, we'll cut it to length after we get it attached to the motor. Here we have our AN fitting, our push lock AN fitting. This is the fitting that will attach to the Catch Can, and then the supplied silicone hose will slide onto here. No clamps needed. It's push lock, so it'll lock and stay. Same thing with the motor side. It will push on, lock and stay. No clamps or zip ties needed there. And of course, your dual baffle RPM Catch Can. Anodized black. So you got dual baffles, bang, bang, intake port, drain port, and then a vent. So this is going to attach to the chassis. This will be on the back side, and then we'll use the supplied hardware. We'll Loctite them, secure it to the chassis. We'll go ahead and get what we can assemble on the Catch Can assembled. We'll do the filter and the drain, and then we will prep the Loctite on the bolts and get ready to take apart the car. All right, guys, we got the filter on the Catch Can, the hardware pre-Loctited. We're going to take this air box off. First thing we're going to do is pop this lid, just the basic clamps, just like the X3 always was. And then we're going to work on removing the worm gear clamps from the air box, and then we can take the air box off using removing the 13mm bolts on the bottom of it. The 13mm bolts are kind of tucked here on the bottom. You got an ear clamp on the back side here, and then an ear clamp on the top. We'll compress this upper hose, the intake hose, and we'll pull it out. And if you don't have an RPM big fatty intake tube or a turbo air box tube, now's a good time to order one. All right, we're gonna lift this tube off, kind of just give the air box a little pull up and then out. It'll come off that back tube, no problem. All right, guys, and as far as installation goes on the Maverick R, this is probably the toughest spot to get into, especially this worm gear clamp up here. Can-Am has them rotated a couple different ways. It could be pointing towards the firewall, but it's always a worm gear clamp, and you can always get a socket and ratchet on there to get it off. And as far as these lower ones, we already have the lower ear clamp cut off, but on the yellow hose, there will be a ear clamp that you will cut, and you really don't even need to cut the top one, but it does make it easier. Essentially, we just need to get that plastic port out of the intake tube and get our billet plug in there and install a new ear clamp. The best way to get these off is just to cut them with a set of wire cutters. All right, guys, don't be afraid to push this tube out of the way. We put our new ear clamp on there. You can see the hose is off of the crankcase breather up there. We're now going to insert the billet plug. One thing I want to note is make sure that your ear clamp is about 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch below the silicone. Now we're going to install this billet plug, and we're going to simply clamp this with a set of wire dikes, or if you have the correct tool, you can use it, but a set of wire dikes will get it on there, no problem. We're gonna install our Catch Can crankcase vent hose from that port up there on the motor, which is the crankcase vent, and then we're actually going to, it's gonna naturally bend down, it's gonna come up the firewall here, and we're gonna jump on line with this harness. We will follow this harness over to the Catch Can. So we'll actually zip tie to this harness with our hose. All right, guys, you can see we have the hose just kind of set here in place. We'll go ahead and we'll hit a zip tie here, and then after we get it installed on the Catch Can and cut the length, we'll add another zip tie to secure it. But for now, I usually just put one up here to hold it where I want it, and we'll move on to installing the Catch Can. All right, guys, this clamp has to slip behind the frame. You're gonna kind of reach up there with both hands, hold it, and then one bolt through the Catch Can and get it started. It is a little difficult getting it started. I know it can be a pain, but once it's up there, it's sick. All right, guys, so the Catch Can is a really snug fit up here. We like it right below and not on the shock. It actually needs to lean back a little bit to give the shock a little room to move. It will never touch the shock. If it's right here, it's completely fine. So you do want to kind of lean it backwards a little bit and then go ahead and tighten your Allen bolts down, and you're ready to install the valve and the crankcase vent. All right, guys, we have got the Catch Can installed up here. We've got the AN fitting, which is kind of loose up here. And what we want to do is kind of get the hose up here. We're going to kind of get a rough idea of what we want to cut off, and we'll go from there. You don't want the hose too tight. You don't want it too long so that it kinks. You want it just kind of up there, a nice smooth bends, and then you can push the silicone hose onto the push lock line. All right, guys, one thing I like to do is with this AN fitting, before I tighten it, I like to push it all the way against the firewall here, get it all the way back before I tighten it up here, and then I'll probably come back and put one more zip tie down low here. Probably come over here, put one more zip tie over here, and that'll be it for installing the Catch Can, and we'll go on to the drain valve. All right, guys, so this is your drain valve. We actually have these new drain valves. So if you had one of our Catch Cans in the past, we had a brass fitting that went up in here. Well, it's actually all built into the Catch Can now. So this is a O-ring sealed fitting, and it's just simply gonna thread in. It doesn't need to be tight. You don't need to use pliers on it. It won't fall out because the hose is gonna be zip tied to the chassis, so it actually can't completely turn out. We're simply gonna install it like this. Just hand tight. That's all it needs, because you don't want to have to get a wrench out to loosen this thing to drain it later. So that's what's kind of cool about ours. No tools, no mess, no nothing. So if you got your drain valve on there, we're now going to be using this rubber hose that we supply. It's 20 inches. It's going to run down the chassis. I like to get on with this harness on the Maverick R. I just kind of follow it down. We'll come back up. We'll add a zip tie right about here. You gotta want to leave a little bit of slack up here to allow for when you're draining, because you don't need to open this all the way to drain it. Keep that in mind, because you can barely crack it open. So I get it just hand tight, put a zip tie up here, and then you'll be able to crack it loose, and then you'll drain all the way to the bottom here, mess free, nothing going on, straight out the bottom of the chassis. It won't hit anything. It's a super clean install. So at this time, we're gonna zip tie this up, and we'll come back to reinstalling our airbox. All right, guys, you've successfully installed your RPM Catch Can on your Maverick R. It's time to reinstall everything, essentially the same way you took it off. When putting the airbox on, kind of a quick little note is to get this hose on, you can actually reach through and kind of push the silicone or the rubber hose around. This one is pretty easy because you're on top of it, you can push it on, but we're gonna throw this thing back together, and we're gonna get back to doing some dyno work on getting these exhausts out to you guys. So RPMSxS.com if you want to pick up one of these Catch Cans, exhaust, whatever it is that you want. We've got auxiliary fuel tank, all kinds of accessories, fan overrides. You guys need Maverick R parts? We've got Maverick R parts. So RPMSxS.com.